Pleased to say we can speak now to the former British ambassador to North Korea, John Everard. John Everard, Ambassador Everard, thanks so much for making the time to speak with us. First of all, your reaction to this news coming out of Seoul?
Like everybody else, shock and horror. This isn't some kind of unstable near dictatorship. This is South Korea, a stable, well-established democracy, and the idea that you could have martial law in South Korea declared on the flimsiest of grounds, I think has horrified everybody watching the Korean Peninsula, and I'm pretty sure almost all Koreans too.
You describe it as the flimsiest of grounds, Ambassador Everard, but in the martial law proclamation it says to safeguard liberal democracy and protect the safety of the people against anti-state forces. You'll know that there is blame being placed on North Korean infiltration into the opposition.
Yes, I don't think anybody takes that particularly seriously. There's no evidence that the opposition has been heavily infiltrated by the North Koreans. What this means, in effect, is that President Yoon objects to losing votes in Parliament, which he's done several times, especially since his hammering in the last general election. He dislikes having to negotiate with people who disagree fundamentally with his political vision, and he's tried to use one of the few tools in the presidential toolkit, if you like, to sidetrack all this. Now, we're watching the National Assembly. You just reported that the National Assembly has voted to overturn this declaration of martial law, which under the Constitution they can do. What fascinates me is that although we have soldiers milling around, supposedly trying to enter the National Assembly and to stop proceedings, you can see they're actually not trying very hard. And I think if we discover that the armed forces are simply refusing to follow orders from President Yoon, that is the end of his presidency.
The question would be whether that order has come in. Ambassador Everard, what do you make of, or what will, do you think, North Korea make of what we're seeing in the South at the moment?
The North Koreans they haven't issued a statement, any form of reaction at all. Of course, there'll be cock-a-hoop that South Korea effectively makes a fool of itself in this way, and we can expect gleeful articles in the North Korean media over the next few days. But what North Korea will really want to know is what comes at the end of this process. Will they in future be dealing with a very much weakened President Yoon? Will they be dealing with a state under martial law? Or will President Yoon be forced to step down, and if so, who's going to replace him?
Ambassador Everard, what can you tell us about President Yoon? What's his background like? What do we need to know to understand the man and why this decision could have come at this time in this way?
He's a conservative South Korean politician, conservative both with a capital and a small c. He is personally wealthy. He is known to be less than keen on traditional democratic freedoms. He hasn't always fully understood the importance of free media. He has a visceral hatred of North Korea, and he and his staff have reacted very sharply to numerous North Korean provocations over the past several months. So that if anybody was going to declare martial law, it's perhaps no surprise that it was going to be President Yoon, but it is, of course, a shock and a tragedy that he's actually done so.
What do you think the reaction of the South Korean people will be? We heard earlier that supporters of the opposition have come to the National Assembly in an attempt to protect it, to try and stop the troops getting in and to make sure that parliamentary business can carry on. President Yoon, of course, is leading a minority government. So what kind of support can he expect, if any, from the people of South Korea? Now,
this is a big question. I suspect that we'll very soon see large-scale demonstrations gathering, particularly around downtown Seoul, around the old presidential palace, and perhaps around the National Assembly. But the martial law declaration specifically prohibits demonstrations. So the $64,000 question is, will Yoon's troops actually intervene to break up the demonstrations? And we just don't know that yet.
Yeah, it's point one of the proclamation: all political activities, assemblies and demonstrations strictly prohibited.
That's right.
We still are in that sort of wait-and-see moment. I mean, you've expressed your surprise about this, Ambassador Everard. What do you think the reaction of neighbours in the region is going to be? We heard from Nicole in Beijing just a short while ago, too early to get a reaction out of China, but other neighbours what will they be thinking?
Japan will be horrified. I mean, the Japanese leadership have invested considerable political capital in rebuilding rather fragile relations with South Korea over a period of several years, all posited on shared democratic values. And now the South Koreans go and pull a stunt like this. They will be absolutely horrified. More widely, I think the Asian community will be watching what happens in South Korea with great caution. And like the North Koreans, will be mostly focused on how this story ends.
Ambassador Everard, without trying to draw too pronounced a line to sort of instability around the world, I mean, this is just the latest example, isn't it? You've got wars and conflict on many continents. We've got instability in South Korea, which I guess, as you described, as sort of seen as a bastion of liberal democracy. We've got a new government in Japan as well that's not quite bedded in yet. I mean, what's your sense of where we're finding ourselves at the moment?
Yeah, things are not looking great, are they? I mean, firstly, I think there is a significant chance that this declaration of martial law will be over quite soon, that Yoon will be forced to back down and almost certainly, in those circumstances, forced to resign, and that the normal democratic processes in South Korea will resume. There will be fresh elections for a new president. But clearly, a stable democracy declaring martial law like this, on top of everything else that's going on in the world, on top of all the other threats to democracy, is really bad news, as one of your earlier contributors was saying.
And finally then, Ambassador, I mean, you've mentioned that you think the North Koreans will be cock-a-hoop about this. Is there any expectation that they could seek to sort of capitalise on the instability in the south? We know how close the DMZ is to Seoul. I mean, we've heard about some of the campaigns, the launching of those balloons across the border. Is it one to keep an eye on in the next few hours and days?
Certainly one to keep an eye on, but I think the odds are against the North actually trying anything too adventurous. We're likely to see a lot of statements coming out of the North over the next few days, but I would be surprised if they actually try anything more than that.